Hi, everyone. My name is Shalhevet Schwartz, and this is Gefet on Daf Yomi, a joint project of Hadran and Yeshivat Drisha. The Gemara that we will be um, dealing with today comes from Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Mem Chet, and deals with the question of what Yoav ben Tzeruya, the general in the time of David HaMelech, what was he thinking in his final moments? This Sanhedrin's Masechet that deals a lot with um, death and with execution more broadly, right? The death penalty is the main topic of the Masechet, despite the fact that ultimately there we see in the rabbinic tradition that even a Beit Din that executes anyone once in 70 years is considered um, a vicious Beit Din, or a bloodthirsty Beit Din. That being said, the main questions that the Masechet deals with are questions about capital punishment and how it works in in a Beit Din context. So one famous example of an execution in Tanakh in Nevi'im Rishonim is that of Yoav ben Tzeruya, who was a general in David's army and sided with David in his fight against Avshalom, his son Avshalom's rebellion, but Yoav sided against Shlomo when at the end of David's life, when Shlomo was battling it out with Adoniah, another son of David, and as a result of Yoav taking the wrong side in that battle, Yoav was ultimately executed on Shlomo HaMelech's orders. So the sugya here is going to go into really the question of what, at the final moments of Yoav's life, what was he thinking? What was he trying to accomplish? What was in his head as he ran to the Karnot HaMizbeach, which he did maybe in order to preserve something, perhaps his life, perhaps something else. So we're going to begin with the Braita on Daf Nechet. Hanu Rabbanan Harugei Malchut Nichsehen LaMelech Harugei Beit Din Nichsehen LaYorshim. Right. So the Braita here makes a distinction between those who are killed by the king and those who are killed by the Beit Din. And those who are executed by the king are their property goes to the Melech, goes to the king, whereas those who are executed by the Beit Din, their inheritors, right, their heirs inherit them. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ach harugei malchut nichsehen liyorshim. So Rabbi Yehuda is cholek on this position, and he thinks that no matter what, including those who are executed just by the king, their heirs inherit them. All right. So the Gemara is going to ask about this machloket, going to raise a kushia on this machloket from the story of Yoav ben Tzeruya. And it's just an interesting methodological point to think about the fact that within the context of the Tannaim and Amoraim and Torah Sheba'al Peh, right, that they're even bringing kushiot from the stories of Nevi'im Rishonim, the question of, right, do we really expect the character in the time of Bayit Rishon to be operating according to rabbinic logic? And if not, then really what is going on rhetorically when the Tannaim and Amoraim make such arguments. But we'll leave that question aside for now and see what the Gemara is actually asking. Right, Bishlama Lamanda Amar Nichsehen LaMelech. Hainu dichtiv vayanas Yoav al Ohel Hashem vaychazek bekarnot hamizbeach. Uchtiv vayomer lo ki po amut. So let's actually go straight into the story of Yoav ben Tzeruya from Sefer Melachim, just to see what's happening, and then we'll be able to understand why that the story is being brought as a kushia on the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Right, what happens? It's clear that Shlomo is winning the war, and they're out to get Yoav. Right, Yoav had sided with Adoniah against Shlomo, even though he had not sided against Avshalom. So what did he do? Yoav runs to the Mishkan in Shiloh and holds on to the corners of the Mizbeach. Right, this seems to be an attempt to right. Vayugad l'melech Shlomo ki nas Yoav ohel Adonai v'ginei etzel Mizbeach. Vayishlach Shlomo Benayahu ben Yehoyada lemor lech pegabo. So Shlomo sends Benayahu, his military commander at that moment, to go and kill Yoav. Vayavo Benayahu el ohel Adonai. Vayomer elav ko amar hamelech. Say, right? Benayahu tries to get Yoav to leave, and Yoav says, "Lo kifo amut." No, I'm going to die here. Vayashav Benayahu el hamelech davar lemor kodi ber Yoav ko anani. And then at the end, we see that Benayahu actually does kill him there, despite the fact that he is holding onto Karn of Mizbeach. But Yoav, for some reason, seems interested in, right, is fleeing to the Karn of Mizbeach as though it will save him or save something. And then um, even at the point where he realizes that he is likely going to die, decides that wants to die there. So, right, if you one reading of this, right, according to the Tanakama in the Breita, who think that there's a distinction lidina, right? There's a legal distinction between those who are killed by the melech and those who are killed by the Beit Din. Maybe there's a way of understanding what Yoav is doing as making it the case that he is not going to be a Harug Melech, but rather is going to be a Harug Beit Din. That by holding onto the Karnot of Mizbeach, the Melech can't get him there, but the Beit Din can. And given that, he might have an interest in becoming a Harug Beit Din rather than a Harug Melech. What's his interest? His interest is that his heirs would inherit him if he's a Harug Beit Din, whereas if he is a Harug Melech, his heirs would not inherit him. So, right? That's why Yoav is fleeing to the Ohel and why he says, if I'm going to die, I'd rather die here, aka where the Beit Din can kill me, but the Melech can't, so that my children can inherit me. Right? But if you're a Yehuda and you think that either way your Yorshim, right, your heirs inherit you, then why would it matter whether he's killed on the Mizbeach or somewhere else? L'chayei is the Gemara's answer. The Gemara's answer is that um, which Rashi explains here as meaning right dechoy ba'alma, right? It's a way of pushing things off. Achi yashivu hadavarim l'shlomo v'yavo, right? It's a way that Yoav is trying to save time, right? There might be some kind of confusion about whether or not you could take someone off from his back to kill him. So even if you can, right, Yoav is trying to hold on to his back in order to save time. That's l'chayesha. Whereas the first explanation in the Gemara is that right he actually has an interest, not a self-interest, but an interest in for his progeny, for his heirs, that he wants them to get his property. So right the way that the Gemara is understanding this debate, right, been based on this breakdown, right, is what really is going through Yoav's head. Is it a survival instinct? Is he just trying to survive for a little bit longer if he can, or is he thinking about the future, not his own future, because he knows that is doomed, but the future of his progeny? Now, Tosafot is going to bring a kushya on the sugya from a different sugya, a sugya in Makot. Tema, says Tosafot, debasof hagulin, mashma debarach lefisha yasaf word mizbeach kolet de'amar shloshat ha'uyot ta'ayoav. Tosafot says, wait a second. If we look at the sugya in Makot, it actually seems like Yoav thought that he was going to save his life, but right, that fleeing to Mizbeach was going to somehow save his life. That was a mistake that he made, as we'll see in the Gemara in Makot, which we're going to see in a second. But in the sugya here in Sanhedrin, it seems like no matter whether it's Rabbi Yehuda or Tanakama in the Breita, either way, Yoav didn't think that he was going to save his life. He thought he was either looking out for his descendants or trying to survive for a little bit longer. He didn't really think that it would save him. Mizbeach kolet, the word kolet, like an ir miklat. The Mizbeach is a place that one can flee to. So let's just take a look at the sugya in Makot, which seems to imply that Yoav thinks that he's going to save his life by running from Mizbeach. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, shtei ta'uyot ta'ayoav ve'ota sha'a. Right, Yoav and Tzeruya made two mistakes at that moment. Right, Yoav so when he ran to the Mizbeach to try to hold on to it. First mistake. Right, he was holding the corners when really only being on top of the Mizbeach actually would have helped. And he was only in the Mishkan. The only Mizbeach that could have saved him is a Mizbeach in the Beit HaMikdash proper. And Rabbi adds another another mistake that Yoav made, that he wasn't a Kohen. But either way, right, it sounds like here Yoav thought that the Mizbeach would liklot, the Mizbeach would save someone and would save him from the death penalty. So what's Tosafot's answer going to be about this? ויש לומר, הימלט אי אפשר, ויכולים לשומרו שלא יברח וימות ברעב. So maybe when according to Tosafot, what the sugya in Makot is answering is not actually the question of whether or not, right, the question of whether Mizbeach polit or not is really just a question of whether the Mizbeach is effective for its purposes maybe being saving him from the Melech, even though the Beit Din could kill him. And that really what's happening in Makot is explaining something else. It's explaining why Yoav chose to go to the Mizbeach rather than chose to run away. Um, and according to, right, to run away to try to actually save his life in some other way. And according to the sugya right, according to the way that Tosfot's explaining now the sugya Makot, the reason he couldn't have run away, right, is that he would have died anyway. He would have died in a famine or something like that. And so Yoav really only had one choice. Right, the only thing he could do at this point, he wasn't going to save his life, but he could flee to the Mizbeach so that he could lehurish nechasav levanav, right, just like what we saw in our sugya in Sanhedrin. And there he made a mistake because holding onto the Mizbeach he thought was going to save him from the Melech, even though the Beit Din would kill him. Turns out that holding onto the corners of the Mizbeach and the Mizbeach in Shiloh doesn't actually do anything, and he ended up being a Harub Melech anyway. So, right, this is one way of Tosafot being miyashev the stira, right, trying to resolve the conflict between these two sugyot, saying really they're answering different questions. Ultimately, the two sugyot can exist in harmony, right? The sugya in Makot is about under what circumstances is the Mizbeach effective at doing what it's doing, although doing what it's doing doesn't actually mean it would save his life. All it would mean is making it the case that the king couldn't kill him and the Beit Din would, at which he might have been interested in anyway, so that his children could inherit him. But the Tosfot continue and actually offer a different and I think methodologically interesting answer to this question. And here the Tosfot is going to do as Baalei Tosfot are wont to do, bring in a Yerushalmi that can shed light differently on the Sugya and the Bavli. And in this case, it's actually going to open up the possibility that actually the two sugyos are in conflict with one another, but that is maybe reasonable in light of a machloket that we see in the Yerushalmi. So it would be Yerushalmi, says Tosafot, Ika plukta d'Amorai. There's actually a machloket Amoraim in the Yerushalmi that seems like it is the machloket between the sugya and Makot and the sugya and Sanhedrin, right? So what's the machloket in the Yerushalmi? De'ika man de'amar sabor haya Yoav de'karnotav shel mizbeach hayu koltin ve'en lecha kolet el gago shel beit ha'olamim aval shel Shiloh ino koltin. So there's one opinion in the Yerushalmi that thinks that Yoav really thought that karnotav shel mizbeach would work to save his life, but that Yoav was wrong in that it would only have worked in the Beit HaMikdash and that it would only have worked on the Mizbeach proper. But so Yoav was wrong in this situation, but that what he intended to do really was to save his own life. So that's one opinion in the Yerushalmi. And the second opinion in the Yerushalmi, ve'ika man de'amar, man diftiv be'techatmeni rosh hashlishi haya toeh. Elo Sanhedrin barach. Amar mutav yihareg veitim v'yarshu banav et tefsav ve'al yihargin yamelech v'yarsheu yamelech. That really what Yoav was trying to do was trying to flee in a way that would make him get killed by the Beit Din rather than by the Melech, so that his heirs would inherit him rather than all of his property going to the Melech. So really, the machloket amoraim that we see in the Yerushalmi is precisely the machloket that Tosfot sees between these sugyot. That the first opinion in the Yerushalmi seems to be like the sugya in Makot. The second opinion in the Yerushalmi seems to be like the sugya in Sanhedrin, and therefore it's not really a problem. The sugyas are in contradiction with one another because each one is a liba demanda amar, right? Each sugya goes according to one opinion among the amoraim, both of which we see in the Yerushalmi, that there really was a machloket about this matter. Now, while we're at it, and while we've kind of delved into this story in Tanakh and Nevi'im Rishonim, let's just take a look at a couple of other Mefarshim who offer different explanations, really, of what was going through Yoav ben Tzeruya's head when he fled to the Mizbeach, just really to broaden the picture a little bit, right? So the Mitzudat David here on these psukim in Melachim, right, offers really a different direction in terms of what Yoav's motivation was. So Bekarnot Mizbeach, what does he say? Right. So at first he does think that Shlomo is not going to be willing to kill him if he's holding onto the Mizbeach, because it would require bringing some kind of tuma into the Mikdash, into the Mishkan here, which he thinks that maybe Shlomo would be prepared to do. When Benayahu comes and says, Ko Amar HaMelech Tzei, so first he thinks, Benayahu thinks that he can get Yoav to leave so that he wouldn't have to be mitameh the Mishkan. And when Yoav says no, right? He's going to get killed anyway. Benayahu is going to, right, Shlomo HaMelech is going to get him executed no matter what. The Amar lo yitzei kipo amud. Why does he say I'm not going to leave because I want to die here? Right? It's not actually about self-interest. It's a revenge instinct, where he wants to make it the case that Shlomo HaMelech, when he kills him, is going to sin. And the fact that he's going right, and the fact that he prefers to die in such a way that kind of brings Shlomo down with him. That's the Perushim of Mitzvot David. And we're going to take a look at one more Perushim with Midrash Tanhuma and Parshat Maseh. Atmotzei shechacham gadol haya Yoav, right? Yoav b'Torah v'rosh Sanhedrin. Shenemar Yoshev Yeshivat Rosh Hashlishim. יושב בשבט החכמני ראש השלישים, ולא היה ידע שכתוב בתורה כי יזיד איש על רעהו, שהלך והחזיק בפרנת המזבח. So the Tanhuma was asking a question. He's saying, what, Yoav was a very smart guy. Yoav knew lots of Torah. How could it be that he didn't know the pasuk? Right, he didn't know the parasha in Parshat Maseh, ki yazid ish al re'ehu, that at the end of the pasuk, right, me'im mizbachiti kachenu lamud. That's a pasuk in the Torah where you can even take someone off, someone who, sure, a rotzech bishgaga can be saved in an miklad or some other way, but someone who kills someone on purpose, who murders someone on purpose, which Yoav was guilty of, the Beit Din is authorized to take him and kill him even from the mizbeach, to inflict the death penalty even that way. So didn't Yoav know that? Ela amar Yoav, harugei Beit Din inam nikbarim b'kvurat avotehem. Ela hin la'atzmam, mutav li lamut kan shekaver b'kivrei avutai. What was Yoav thinking? Right, there's a difference between harugei Beit Din and harugei malchut, right? Just like what we saw in this again in Sanhedrin, but it's a different distinction. It's not about who gets that property, but it's about where do they get buried. And harugei Beit Din, according to the Midrash here, they're not buried with their forefathers, whereas those who are killed not al pi the whole process are buried with their forefathers. And Yoav wanted to be buried with his forefathers. One thing that just like an interesting point that comes up right between this explanation and the explanation in Sanhedrin that we saw is both make a distinction between harugei Beit Din and those who are killed in other ways. According to the Sugya in Sanhedrin, holding onto the Mizbeach made it such that Yoav would be a harug Beit Din and not a harug Malchut, and therefore that his children would inherit him. Whereas here, holding onto the Mizbeach, right, Yoav's logic is that holding onto the Mizbeach makes him not a harug Beit Din, and therefore, right, that he can't go through the entire procedure and process. He just needs to get killed there on the spot, and therefore he cannot be treated like a harug Beit Din, and therefore would be buried with his forefathers. So what we see here, 5 different explanations in total, right? But a couple from this, a few from the different sugyot and a few from the Mefarshim in the story about really what was going through Yoav's head. Was it just a survival instinct that he wanted to, or did he really think that he could prevent his execution that way, or sort of a similar survival instinct, but even a temporary one? He just wanted to delay his death. That's the chayei sha'ah that we saw in the sugya in Sanhedrin, right? Maybe it was so that his descendants would inherit his property. The other explanation that we saw in the sugya in Sanhedrin, maybe, and then maybe we get the explanations of the Mefarshim on the story, that either that he wanted to be buried with his ancestors, like we saw in the Midrash Tanhuma, or that he wanted to kind of, as his last act of defiance, wanted to force Shlomo to sin when executing him. Right? There's the survival instinct. There's care for his family, whether that's his ancestors or his descendants, and then there's this kind of vengeful, bring my executioner down with me instinct that we see in the Mitzvot David. And just a final kind of methodological point. What did we see? We saw both the attempt from the Gemara to bring the stories in Nevi'im Rishonim in conversation with rabbinic law, um, and raise the question about really what that means and what that's about. And we also saw right the various kinds of ways that Tosafot um, engages with or grapples with the idea that there are stirot between different sugyot, either by trying to be miyashev stirah, by trying to resolve the contradiction and say actually the two different sugyot are responding to different questions and they don't really contradict. Um, or a really neat little use of the Yerushalmi, right, that brings in a sugya in the Yerushalmi to explain that actually, yeah, sure, there's conflict within the sugyot, but that conflict within the sugyot is a reflection of a machloket amoraim that we actually know about, and so it shouldn't bother us. It's not a contradiction, but rather it is a machloket. Um, Thanks so much, and see you next week, hopefully for a sugya that might be a little bit lighter and deal with life rather than death. Take care.